The Overwatch platform was designed really for one primary purpose, which is to cut through all the haystacks of data and quickly find the needles, or in this case, what's important to you and what's causing risk. And so if you look at the dashboard that you see, in the middle is the globe, and it's spinning and it's pretty, and a lot of folks go, what does that mean? What you're looking at there is one of the apps in our platform, and I'll talk about the platform in a minute. But fundamentally, you're looking at the deception sensors that are part of our platform that we've deployed in AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and they're getting attacked all day, every day. And we're learning from those behaviors from the bad guys. And the good news for our customers is we're taking those learnings and we're putting them into the platform. So if we get a user or we get a hacker who's doing some new thing that hasn't been seen, we're going to pick that behavior up. We're going to create a signature or a detection for that behavior. And now all of our customers get that because it's part of the threat intelligence that, by the way, is included in the platform. As we talk about the platform idea, the best way I describe it is if you think about when you got your iPhone or your Android phone, it came with some apps. And what you as a user never had to think about is how do those apps talk to each other? So you took a picture with your phone and you went to Facebook and you uploaded it. Well, what happens under the covers is Apple on their platform has taken that data and they've normalized it and they've enriched it, right? They've added geolocation, they've added date, time, whatever. But now you've got a better version of that data and they've shared it to other applications who are using the platform. If you think about Overwatch, it's an open XDR platform that's got some apps that come with it, and we'll talk about those. But then if you've got an investment in an endpoint agent, we can plug that into our platform and we'll do a lot of that same functionality around the data that I described. So what does that mean? And I'll come back to the dashboard. I know it's pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff and I'll explain it. But what I want you to understand is the underlying platform or architecture is taking all of your data, it's normalizing it. So if you've got Cisco and Checkpoint and ForcePoint firewalls, we're going to normalize that data so that when I look at a firewall alert, I won't care that it's coming from a Palo Alto. I'm going to care that it's a firewall alert, and then I'll handle it appropriately. So that's the normalization piece, and we do that across endpoints and servers and you name it, we're going to normalize the data. Two, we're going to enrich it. So we're going to add things that you don't typically see in a packet. We're going to add geolocation, we're going to add reputation, and we're going to add user data. And there's really about 17 different types of things we're adding into this data element that we then call and we convert into JSON, and we call it an interflow. And the interflow is much like a packet flow and much like a net flow, only it's better. Net flow doesn't have context. Packet flows are way too heavy. You can't store them. You can't run AI on them. There's just too much. So what we've created is an interflow. It's JSON. It's reduced in size, but it's enriched with these data elements I mentioned. It's normalized, and then it's deduplicated. So a lot of our competitors out there will ingest all the data sources, and in most cases, they're deduplicating data in that process, and you're paying for that. We pre-process the data, and we do these things that I described, so that when we do bring it in, we're giving you clean data that's been normalized, deduped, enriched, reduced. And what that leads to is the whole idea of, and I know you've heard this garbage in, garbage out concept. It doesn't matter how good your math is, your machine learning, your AI. If your input is bad, your output's going to be bad. So we said, let's solve the data problem first. Then we run it through 7 or 8 different types of machine learning And then we give you detections that are going to be accurate, timely, with the end game of reducing dwell time. If you're not familiar with what dwell time is, it's a great stat in the security space where we're really talking about when did the bad guy get in and how long did they live in your environment, hence the dwell time idea. So all of that to say, we've got a platform that does malware analysis, it does network traffic analysis, it does SIM work, it does about 17 different apps, 18 right now, I think, and we'll talk through some of those. But again, it's these apps in a platform that give you functionality in a single tool, a single pane of glass, if you will. That's what you're seeing on the screen. So back to the screen real quick. Let's talk about what that is. On the left here, we've got an asset view. So if your run books that you've developed are asset focused, we can accommodate that. So all of the assets that are higher risk will gravitate towards the center of this bullseye or this radar screen. Again, I'm helping you with this platform prioritize where you spend your time. To the right, we're looking at event-based responses. So what events are higher risk than others? If it's a reconnaissance event, meaning they've done a port scan, it's probably not that important. It's going to show up down here in the bottom left. If somebody has an event over here in the right that is a SIM flood, or here we've got cryptojacking, or God forbid up here we've got data exfiltration, those events are higher risk. I'm going to focus there if I'm in a security operations center. And then if you look at the ARC really takes all of that data that we talked about and puts it in categories according to risk. So as you were thinking about risk-based management of data, you've got reconnaissance, which is a lower risk. And as you go around the ARC, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and finally, actions and exfiltrations. This is where your data is leaving your network. And so if you're focused on a risk-based approach, this is the third option. Let's focus on these top three categories, because these are the ones that are going to cause me brand reputation risk. Once I get all those cleared off, then maybe I'll start focusing on exploitation or something else. But ultimately, this gives you a risk-based approach should you choose that over asset or event. And that's what the dashboard's designed. Now, let's dive in a little bit. The dashboard, we've got a methodology around collection, detection, investigation, and response. And I'll dive into each of those a little bit, understanding that we've got an hour, and in an hour it's hard to cover all of this. So I'm going to keep it at a high level, and if you've got questions, we'll dive in deeper. Collection, we've got two methods. We do API connectors, so AWS, Office 365, etc. And then we've got syslog ability, where we can take data from your existing tool sets as well that aren't API driven, and give you a pervasive visibility. And I like to use pervasive as the term, because the more we see, the better our ability to detect and respond. So pervasive visibility, that's what collection's all about. And we can talk through those as well. Detection, we've got multiple ways where we can help detect bad things. We can detect on the kill chain. So that's, again, this ARC is the Lockheed Martin kill chain. We've got malware detections, where we're actually, based on our photon sensor, which is a network traffic analysis malware tool, we can catch malware that's going across your network and take action. We've got machine learned IDS. So some of you may think IDS and you go, wait a minute, it came out in the early 2000s, and it was noisy and hard to use. And you're right, it was. what we've done is we've said, let's take all of the output of a IDS and run it through machine learning. And so now what you get is high fidelity machine learning events versus 500,000 events that are IDS events that you just can't whittle through. There's no way to get to them. We've made it better. And again, that's part of the platform. User behavior, we have the ability to derive. I normally log in Nashville. Today I'm logged in Chicago. Is that a good thing, bad thing? It's a deviation. It's an anomaly. But when you couple that with all of those other enrichments I talked about, geolocation, reputation, time of day, whatever, you can start to derive a risk score that says, wait a minute, my account is being logged in from Beijing at 2 a.m. It's running an app I've never run before. It's hitting a server I've never touched. Now I've got a detection that I can take action off of. And so these are the detection capabilities that we've got. We've got phishing. We can do network traffic, panoramic, and I can show you what that looks like as well. Ultimately, understand in this CDIR methodology, once we have the data, we run our detections against it, and then we make it available for you to do some investigation. And we'll start with one that I like to talk to because most people don't think about this. We're sitting on a span port. We give you access to physical and logical asset data. So having been a security guy for as long as I have, one of the things I typically don't get from my IT organization is asset data. And so we decided that because we're seeing span traffic, why not make it available to our customers who are trying to manage risk? So if you look here, what I'm showing you is all of the data that we've identified on the wire. And we have some capabilities here that are pretty cool. One, we actually give you a risk score on that host. And we see that because we're seeing security events tied to a host. We have the ability to do what we call a thumbs down. And this is an asset that Bob in accounting brought in his MacBook that isn't a company asset. You see it, you unapprove it, and now every hour we run a query that says, if you see an unapproved asset, let me know, right? Send an email, let the SOC know. Fundamentally, you could, depending upon how you've got it deployed, you could tell your NAC device, like a Forescout, let's go ahead and isolate that IP. Let's isolate that device. That's where this thumbs down idea comes in. You could actually say, for every device that's either unapproved or new, which is what this green asterisk is, let's go ahead and quarantine them and put them in a guest Wi-Fi or put them on a guest network so they can't route anywhere internally until you go through an approval process. So this is the power of the asset. The other thing that's interesting is if you click on it, I'm going to show you some data that you don't typically get. One is I'll tell you where it's located. If we can geolocate it, I will. I'm going to tell you over the last year what IPs it's had. In this case, it's only had one. If it were running multiple services, I would show you what those services were. And then I'll show you down below here what the risk score is for that device, how many events it had over the last month, what are the login failures. All of that data is here in the platform. It's one of the apps in OpenXDR. And as a security guy, it's fantastic to be able to get asset data. User behavior analytics, I talked a little bit about that. And so I'll just show you at a high level some detections. Impossible travel, what that one is I'm logged in Nashville, and 2 hours later, I'm logged in from Beijing. We know that's not possible. And so the tool will pick that up and it'll say, this looks like an anomaly. And then when you go look at it, you find there's some other data elements that support that position. You can automate responses. Login time, I'm an 8 to 5 guy. It's 2 a.m. It's an anomaly, not bad, not good. It's just different. But when you start to couple some of these things together, right? Impossible travel, I'm logged in at a different time, I'm using an app I've never used before, I'm accessing an asset I've never touched before, I'm moving data, typically I'm a 2 gig a day, today it's 15. All these things together drive risk scores. And if you think about the dashboard I showed you at the beginning, those risk scores will bubble up, and now you can focus on that needle that we've helped you find in all this haystack of data. That's user behavior. It's very powerful. Threat hunting. So if you look at the threat hunting, for example, in the last 5 hours, I'm going to change that to 24. There have been 4,000 security events. And the challenge that most companies face, and let's just move that to a week and see, 24,000 events. How do you whittle through those? And so we've got all this data that, if you remember, has been cleaned, enriched, deduped, all those things. So it's really good data. How do I go look through it and find what's bad? So what we've done is we've created a threat hunting library, and we said, here are some queries that your team can run to go find bad things. So for example, failed logins. If we go look, what we're going to see is all the failed logins over time on what types of traffic that we're seeing here. So most of them are Windows login failures. And as we scroll down, we can see what are the top login failures. So surprisingly, really not surprisingly, the sysadmin account's been getting hammered, or system admin, or if you scroll through administrator, typical things you'll see in a honeypot network like ours. And where are they coming from, right? Sources, you're able to quickly run through those. But even what's better is if you come to the right here, you can see, if you click on action, you can see you've got a host in Strasbourg, France, I probably pronounced that wrong, attacking my host in Virginia, right? So I'm seeing this, I'm going, wait a minute, I don't do any work in France. So what I could do is I could actually take an action right here and say, let's go ahead and block that guy. So I'm going to click on block on firewall. I'm going to select the firewall I want to block it on. I'm going to select the IP, and I'm going to say, let's go ahead and block that for 5 hours. And if I hit submit, a couple of things happen. Number one is we talk to the firewall that we've set up in a pre-provision or an onboarding process, and we say, put this IP into a block rule that we've already built. So what I'm not doing, guys, is I'm not creating a new rule. I'm not forcing you into an ITIL change control process because the block rule already exists. What I'm doing is adding an external IP into the block rule for a period of time. And it could be forever. It could be days, weeks, whatever. In this case, I set it for 5 hours. And then what happens is the IP gets put into the block rule. The firewall does its magic, and that lets my SOC team or my analysts go troubleshoot and triage that event. Was there anything else that's happening from that IP? Is there anything bad happening? So what I've done is I put a control in place to mitigate the risk for a period of time. At the end of that 5 hours, I have the opportunity to go and extend it, or the tool will automatically pull that rule out of the firewall or pull that IP out of the rule. And then the third thing it does is it creates a log entry. So if you've got regulated organizations that need to know that we're seeing an event, we're taking an action, show me the evidence, it's in the platform itself. So it gets appended to that interflow record that we talked about. In addition to blocking, I can do other things. I can send an email to my SOC team. I could create a new case. I could add a tag. I could add a comment. But what's pretty cool down here too is if I said, wait a minute, this source I don't like it at all. Let me just go ahead and block it. Let me go see what is happening laterally with this host. Meaning, is it hitting anybody else? As I scroll down further, here's where that interflow I talked about comes into play. So what you're seeing here are data elements that are human readable, that have all the data behind the event. So here's a username I showed you earlier. So the tower admin is failing. You've got a source, or the destination here is a device in Virginia. The source is coming from 185.202.1.238. As a security guy, one of the things I always asked my vendors is, show me the packet capture. Well, if you rewind to where I said packet flows are heavy and expensive, most vendors won't show you it because of that. They don't store it. We don't store it either, but what we have done in this interflow process is we store all the data elements that you need to see so that you can validate, yes, this is bad. If you look here, I also mentioned earlier that we look at the reputation and we add that. So here you've got a source reputation, and the source of that reputation is ET Pro. ET Pro is a Proofpoint commercial threat feed that we include in the platform, and we're using that, and we're taking their output, and we say, wait a minute, this IP, Proofpoint says it's bad. This is where it came from. And so this is the power behind having the right data, having the right detections, building rules around it, and then being able to take action. And so that's threat hunting. Again, if you go back to, I've got 24,000 events in the last week. What we've done with this threat hunting library is let you quickly start focusing on what is it you want to know about. And that's threat hunting. We also have automation behind that. So what we can do is say, I want to see all successful logins from Russia. That's this one here. And what we do is we say every 5 minutes, or whatever interval you want it to be, could be hours, days, weeks, I want to run this interval or this query against all of my tenants. And I apologize, I forgot to talk about tenants. I'll come back to that in a minute. And I want to run this query. And what this query says is I want to see any successful login from the Russian Federation, because I don't do business in Russia. Now that could say, it could say Iran, I could say China, it could say whatever. But in this case, if I have any successful logins from Russia, I want to do something. This is where automation comes in. So in a login success, I want to send an email. So the first thing could be, I want to send an email to Eris. And in the body of the email, we're going to say this is a test. Right? This is just one of our test emails. I could add a second condition or a second response. And the second one is via Slack message, I want to notify my SOC that, hey, we just saw a successful login from Russia. I could have a third trigger or a third action that says, via webhook, I'm going to write to my proxy and I'm going to block that IP. Or I'm going to write to the firewall and block that IP. Or I'm going to go to Active Directory, I'm going to disable the user. Or if I've got some really good scripts that I've run around automation, I can run that script. But what you end up here with is you have an event that happened, and then based on the criteria we've set, I want to respond to that event via this threat hunt. And in that response, I've got a mini run book, if you will, of actions. Again, first action, send an email. Second action, send a Slack note just in case. Third action, firewall change. All of those things, all those actions that, by the way, get logged. But more importantly, this lets you have automatic response to something that happens in a real-time fashion. This is automatic threat hunting. Visualizer, this helps us build reports. It helps us quickly figure out what's going on. If you have folks who know Kibana, I'm not going to show you that, but if you do, it's in the platform, network visibility. It's all here. Again, these are apps in OpenXDR. And finally, response. I showed you automation. This is where we would do firewall config. So as part of an onboarding, we would actually walk you through configuring the firewall rules, get that all set up. So if we get into a response function, we can do that. And then we've got reporting, scheduled reporting. So at a high level, we have HIPAA, we have PCI, we have CIS 20, or top 20 controls. We've got multiple reports, and we can create more reports as you need them. You know, secondarily, these are some of the general reports that you typically see from most vendors. Can walk you through those too. But to me, one of the coolest parts of the platform is, I showed you detections, right? We got a bunch of detections. Under threat hunting, I can create a query here and I save it. And then I can come under response, and under reports, I can turn that query into a report or into a dashboard. And then that report I can make scheduled reoccurring. And all of that's coming because if you remember, we got the data right, we've run our detections against it, and now we have the power of automation to run that query on a periodic basis, take action on it, and then create reports to run off of that. What I forgot to talk about earlier, and I'll just cover briefly, and then we can ask questions, is the platform by default was designed to be multi-tenant. What does that mean? Well, if you look at our competitors, you'll find if you had 8 customers, it would need 8 versions of their platform. We don't believe in that. We have one platform, and if you look here, these are some tenants that we've set up across the globe. And the cool part about this is each tenant is individual and unique, and by the way, isolated from each other. So my users and my reports and my data in Canada are isolated from Brazil, which means I could give my user in Brazil access, and all he or she would see is the data in Brazil. And that's the power of multi-tenancy. You as our partner, you would have your own tenant up top and then all of your customers underneath it, and you would be able to see all of the data for your tenants. We, as your partner, would be able to see your tenants and then be able to drill down and help manage that risk for you. Ultimately, keeping it isolated, separated, unique reports, unique users, unique data, unique machine learning. And that's really the genesis of this platform. Questions? And that's, if you want to stop recording, feel free. But this is where, and hopefully along the way, people have interrupted